Up next, I would like to welcome Diogo from Wehype and Sirach from Rovio, and they're going to be talking about understanding the creator-driven economy engine for mobile games. So, welcome to the stage.
First of all, thanks everyone for attending, and it's great to see a lot of faces here in the room. Maybe we'll kick off things with a very short introduction about ourselves. My name is Diogo. I'm a partnerships manager at Wehype. If you don't know us, Wehype is an agency and a platform that helps publishers launch, manage, and scale influencer and creator campaigns, collaborations that try to drive growth towards the game. So it actually is a great placement for this panel right after Marion's own panel about introducing the methodology about how to find these creators. I've worked mostly on the mobile side of the business, and I've been very happy to work with titles such as Brawl Stars, Subway Surfers, Clash of Clans, Monopoly Go. So a lot of work in that space. And I'm very happy to be joined by Sirach Mendes from Rovio. Sirach, maybe you want to give a few words to tell?
I can say, Sirach, I work at Rovio as influencer marketing lead. Rovio is the company of Angry Birds. We are also owned by Sega, so it's, Sonic, everything cool, all those old retro games. And I've worked before in the industry in a bunch of other companies. You can look up that. Yeah.
Nice. And for today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about how can we translate these creator collaborations from the different life cycles of where a game is to building growth and going a bit beyond what's attributable and what is the direct effect when it comes to installs, and to understand how that can provide a scope for growth in the game. So actually, I think I would like to even start there. In the perspective of a publisher, and you've worked in a lot of cool and great publishers with a lot of big games, how do you feel has been the vibe towards creators and influencers when using it as a tool for growth in the games?
I mean, it's fundamentally changed, right? If you look at YouTube's blowing up in 2015, 16, when this trajectory took off. In those days, people would look at ads before the YouTuber, or having the YouTuber call out a NordVPN or whatever VPN ad, right? That works. That may not work today. That's about 10 years ago. Creators were more of okay, we put an ad in there and we see how that returns. Now you need to build relationships with them, and you need to build that at scale. There's like 60 million YouTubers, right, out there, 100 million channels. TikTok, 1/3 of the audience, or half the audience, or maybe 100% of the audience posts, so that everyone's an influencer. So it's completely changed from a model where you can't really automate like a UA network versus actually building relationships with these creators, but you need to build them at scale, which is quite difficult. So you need partners, agencies. Individually, you can't have a relationship with 1,000 creators, so you can build programs around that.
And I think, like, from experience that before working in the creator space, I worked a lot also on ad networks, on mobile marketing. I think if you come from like 5, 6, 7 years ago, creators were seen as a source of traffic, as another ad network, and like, okay, to the budget that I put in here, how many installs, what's the retention I can get. And I think the shift we started to see a few years ago is a more holistic one, where creators can not only provide that immediate uplift, but can also raise the social awareness and the space that the game can find for itself, and let it create this sort of a growth loop in which by itself it maintains people coming back organically to create content for the game and build it from there. And actually, that leads into the other thing I wanted to talk about is regarding the life cycle of the games. Obviously, we see a lot of, especially in mobile, from pre-registration to launches to maintaining. How do you approach creators depending on where the game is positioned, and how do you figure out what's the best way to take the next step into?
So it really depends on the game cycle. If it's a new game, you're looking at discovery, a lot of brand awareness, versus an established game. You're looking to, re-engage your users. You're looking at targeted demographics. This game, this works. So these YouTubers would have that audience. That's more difficult because there's a black box in YouTube. Some platforms you can see the audience metrics, but there's a black box. So you have to test a lot. I think, Marion spoke pretty well in the last presentation. You have to test a lot of influences, but testing at scale can be difficult. And also, budget. There are budget constraints for companies, but I think it's important to see how do you test them for established games. If it's a new game, you need to go all out. I mean, a great example is Rematch. I think the game, if everyone's heard about, Rematch is driving around, I don't know, 150,000 CCUs in a beta, right? Because of influencers and a community strategy. Community influencers are your community. I mean, your influencers for that game has more followers than all their social media channels. That shows scale of a new launch. The game launches, I think, in June. I think it's a very good example in the industry. They have generated around 150 million views with just open beta. There's pretty much very low paid budget on that, but that shows scale of a new launch.
And I think, like, based on that, that's a really good example with Rematch. But one thing we've started to see more and more mobile games adopt is at later life cycles. I mean, everyone's seen what Epic has done with Fortnite, with creator codes, and just keep that wheel spinning in terms of having organic content by having these ambassadors through creator codes that provide this very steady way of bringing new people in while rewarding influencers and creators themselves. And we start to see a lot of examples in that regard in the mobile space as well. Not only Supercell has their creator program very built across all their games, but I think, like, when we are working with mobile publishers, we start, from the agency perspective, we start to see a lot of this interest. Like, when's the right time to build a creator program into the game, and how can we kick off that presence? I think it needs to be combined, like first sparking the interest by having the influencer campaigns see the entertainment value, making it worth for the audiences and for the creators, and then sustaining and providing this roadmap that can keep creators motivated and engaged throughout the game's life cycle whenever there's new updates, whenever there's something new and cool to talk about, so they can keep their audience engaged. So it's about giving these tools that facilitate for that. And that actually brings to another question, which is measuring the upside of influencers and creators. It's very tempting to take it as another traffic source, so like what's directly attributable. But the other day I actually saw a statistic that a lot of the impact when you do creator marketing, influencer marketing, goes largely not directable attributed, because you can only assess it when you look at it as a whole. I wanted to ask, whenever you launch creators campaigns with creators and collaborations, how do you look at success? How do you evaluate what makes it a win, or when something is falling a bit behind?
Sure, I think the number one metric is install, right? People want to get installs. That is not very easy with influencers. You would have to have a very big scale. And if you see viral games, it breaks that model, right? So if you look at Stumble Guys, look at, I don't know, Clash of Clans, Brawl Stars, the way these things scale, if you only track by installs, then your campaign may not look very successful.
It's
but
like
the organic,
a drop in the bucket, right?
The organic value, right? That evergreen content is going to be there. An individual will see that and then go install or re-engage. Now, you can't really calculate that. There would have to be certain models. You can calculate it. You can build data models around it, but there is a lot of uncaptured value when you have an influencer and a creator strategy that's at scale. A few influencers, sure, you can test, and if they don't work, then you compare that to a future campaign, or you stop doing those campaigns, then it's not going to give you a holistic data of how that scales incrementally over time.
And typically, one recommendation that we make for, whenever a publisher is wanting to test creators for this type of initiative is, while it's tempting to usually go for the largest markets to, because if the largest markets are there, it's because they have the more impact. But it also might imply that with smaller budgets or even medium budgets, it's very hard to assess the upside that that brings in the market as a whole. Typically, what we suggest, if direct impact is a main objective for a campaign or for collaboration, is to test it with an isolated market. And here, by isolated, we mean something that you can directly track, even in terms of language, that doesn't create spillover with other regions. And if possible, pause other marketing initiatives to understand, okay, in isolation, what is the impact of doing something with influencers, with creators, and then observing what's the uptick, what does this translate to, and how can we isolate it beyond the direct attribution. And I think one thing that we always get the question is, it's easy to get creators on board for campaigns, essentially from their side, they put a price onto it, or they gauge by their motivation by, you contract them for this. But we always hear, specifically on mobile, that authenticity is a big concern, because if a game like GTA or Elden Ring is coming out, it's not hard to see that creators will want to jump on that. However, for a mobile game, especially if you go for platforms such as Twitch, where that presence is limited to a few titles, how do you think we can ensure that the content does have that authenticity behind it? It doesn't feel like an ad, like it's reading off a script or reading off talking points.
In an ideal world, we always want them to be authentic, right? The challenge is you're going to work with influencers who are probably not going to be authentic, but the audience can tell, right? They have a parasocial relationship with the audience. And this is why it's good to work with someone who actually matches your genre, or actually is going to do something, who does similar games or similar, kind of content. If it's way off their content, then it may just not work. It could work if there's an audience or demographic you're targeting, but say if you're doing on Twitch, and say you're doing Marvel Rivals, and the guy is playing Fortnite, there is a match over there, but they're playing, I don't know, a cozy game like Animal, Crossing, it may not work, right? And the creator may just get on your campaign, but may not be really interested. So how the creator reacts, or the influencer reacts to your content and the campaign really matters, because if it's not authentic, the audience picks up on it. You're not going to see a lot of performance on that. Sure, you'll get a piece of content, but it's not great for long term.
And I think there's, like you mentioned, I think there's a big aspect on that about, finding the right fit of creator, not only on the games they play, but also on the tone they have, like how they speak with their audience, how they engage. And that, the beauty of that is a lot of that is actually measurable. But then I think on the publisher and the agency side, there's actually a big responsibility, and you shouldn't just put something that leaves everything on the creator to know how to engage with the audience, especially if we're talking about mobile games, in which it might have a different entertainment value than those games that are usually used to promoting or used to talk about. One thing that we always make sure that we pay a lot of attention to is how can we make the content that the creator is going to talk about feel fun. So if you have, for example, a match 3 game and you want to promote it either on Twitch or on YouTube, that by itself might be hard to keep the entertainment value going, but then you can add a community layer. You can have community challenges in which the gameplay is not necessarily the main hook, but it's how the community approaches it and how they interact with each other is the one that provides really a lot of value on this. And in terms of creator programs, after we go through the hump of actually pulling people in, getting it reach, getting it visibility, okay, we got the installs. How can we keep the social engagement for that game high instead of, okay, we put budget into it, we put a campaign, creates a peak, but then it goes back into a valley again. How are we able, through programs, codes, to sustain it a little higher? How does your experience tell about it?
Yeah, so I think creative programs, the word program can be paid or organic, right? So paid is you do a campaign, and then the organic part is something what Epic has done pretty well with creator codes in Fortnite, but then Supercell has done it, and Scopely has done it, and a lot of other companies, Capcom has done it. And I think it's really important to look at long-term relationship building with the creator. Okay, you pay the creator to cover your game, but can you give him a monetary incentive to work so that when he covers your game or someone of his audience buys something in the game, that creator gets a kickback as an affiliate program, some kind of commission, yes, that's a very successful model. It's directly tying your game's economy now to the creator economy. So that requires a lot more. It requires a development team to actually build content updates. You need to actually have early access. You need to build, teams who will manage relationships with these creators, because it's not just, you put a button and they're all, doing their campaigns. You have to talk to them, give them early access. And creator codes really work well because it's directly tied to your in-app purchase. If your in-app purchase, imagine, you can go read up the public information out there. Tim Sweeney said it, right? 400 million is generated by the creator economy, but that's also creator maps within Fortnite. That's a huge incentive because now you're not just getting new installs through your influencers creating content, you're also getting monetization, which is huge. If the creators can increase your monetization by a percentage, that's a very good business case to build a program.
And I think it all comes down to how can we build this sort of loyalty, but we have to be mindful that this loyalty ultimately, no matter how much if you pay the creator, if you keep the audience coming back, it's very hard to fake it. You need to create the instruments and the levers that do actually make it sustainable in the long term so that the creator does it, sure, by having, if he has a creator code and you can get something from when the audience does it, but then the content will just reach a point where the audience will not enjoy seeing what it is. So it's very important from our experience that game teams, marketing teams, and then the influencer teams that work together with your game actually work very closely and not in islands, so everything can be part of the same initiative. Because one of the aspects, like whatever is in the game, will actually feed the interest that you have on it. Actually, a really good example that just happened a few weeks ago is on Clash Royale. There's this massive streamer called Jinxie that for a long time he said, I'm a huge fan of the game. Like, I love playing this game a lot. And I believe like he has recently got a creator code for Clash Royale. And since he's just been streaming Clash Royale organically on his own, because the passion for the game is there, and because his audience is something that keeps him coming back. So that is the perfect scenario where it didn't even take activating him through a paid campaign for him to be interested in having this. We always hear about, like when I'm talking with publishers, that attention is rented and it's not owned, meaning you have to keep giving reasons for the audiences to care about it. I see that we have 3 minutes left. Just want to have one more question, one more discussion point, and then we can open for 1 or 2 questions. How do you see it coming next? What do you think is the next step when it comes to creators, specifically for mobile games? I've seen a lot of enthusiasm, for example, with creator skins, as something that is making people, like some publishers, incorporating the creator experience directly into the game. How do you view this?
Yeah, I do think creator skins work. I've done it in previous companies. It's really great. The creator sticks on for a long time. It's a lot of development resources, so we have to actually think about that to plan that. And again, if you have 10,000 influencers, you can't make 10,000 skins, right? The economy will break. So we have to think of macros, but also micros. I think there's different strategies you can have for macros and micros, but I think a bigger picture is, can we work with micro influencers at scale? Because 90% of all the influencers are there micro. If we can actually build a model or some kind of creator code, or not just creator codes, but some kind of incentive-based program for these micros at scale, and also build this massive army again of influencers, you're going to be that brand will be successful. Very few brands are able to get to that point. You have to have a paid budget. You just can't expect this to grow magically overnight. If you're an IP brand like Angry Birds or like Sonic, yes, it's easier to build it. But if you're not, then you really have to go and spend or build that community yourself, and then build incentives or loyalty programs so that they stick around for long term. But I think the micro creators have a much stronger parasocial relationship with their audience versus the mega ones. The mega ones everyone knows, but you go to social media for news, and in the feed of TikTok doesn't mean you follow someone. Your feed could be anything what interests you or related interests. So how you build strategies around related interests with the algorithms, it's a challenge. I don't think everyone's trying to figure it out. We're trying to as well. Hopefully we get there. But I think those companies will be the ones who will be in the forefront with this.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Raj. I see we have 50 seconds. Good for if anyone has a question they would like to share. If not, perfect. We gain 40 seconds. Thank you so much for your time.